am often asked, what would you ask about a course before you took it? Well, for me, I would ask some things like, what kind of exam process do you have? Are your exams moderated? What percentage are moderated? How do you set your exams? Do you have internal assessors or external assessors? Is there an external process in order to ensure that your exams are up to date? Do you have verification? What level of verification would you have? I'd also want to know who marks my paper, whether it's students, assessors, and again, do we have double marking? What kind of marking are we going to have? And how will the exam test my knowledge? All these questions are most important because if you do not get a good exam, you haven't passed the course. I had one exam where the lecturer, who is a doctor, asked questions on items that we had never even touched in the class. When I questioned this, she said, "Oh, well, we should have listened in class. She had touched on it." And I said to her, "You hadn't." "No, well, she gave us some handouts." I said, "Yes, but you didn't tell us that the handouts were going to form part of our exam." Well, I passed the exam. I don't know how well, but I think they were just annoyed with me more than the fact that I'd done so well in the exam. The bottom line was it was the most distressing time of my life, and I would not like anybody to have that. So I have learned to ask those questions about the exams before I take the course. I'm not interested in taking a course, no matter how good it might look, if I cannot write the exam with a degree of certainty, knowing that there's fairness and validation of that exam. It's just too stressful, and the chances of failure are too great. So let's have a look at this subject. Did you ever hear anybody say, "Yay, I have a test"? I don't think anyone's ever said that. To most of us, a test or exam is painful and hard work, and even the brightest people show fear at having to prove how much they really know. I've met straight A students who are absolutely terrified of any form of test. An exam should test your knowledge, but there's always a fear they'll test the one thing you did not study or you will not understand the questions. An exams come in many forms. Each exam needs a different approach for study, but there are some common techniques. Learning time is a problem for adults, and we'll be looking at how we can gain time for ourselves by being more effective in how we learn. Let's get into the mind of the examiner. I want to dispel the first misconception. Most examiners want you to pass. Remarks are actually quite painful to write and they're time consuming. But an exam that has a 100% pass rate would not be a good exam. And examiners get marked on their exams as well. A 50% or lower pass rate would mean that the exam is set at too high a level. So that wouldn't be a good exam as well. The best exam is one that gets the majority of people through, but with a 2% distinction rate. Then you can say you pretty much hit the nail on the head. The exam setter should always be an expert in the material, and the moderator should be more of an expert. Now, I always check my exams against the outcomes, and I wish I could say that this is the norm. But like everything, price is a factor. A little subject on past exams. Examiners are lazy, and they don't often change an exam paper setting, and sometimes even the question types can be the same. This is good news for you if you can get a past exam. However, never learn the questions. I don't know many examiners who would be that lazy to leave the last exam's questions in the paper. They might use them as a type, but they won't use them as the actual question. So let's get into the mind of the marker now. Now, markers don't necessarily set the exams. So quite often there's a very strict memorandum that they have to follow, and marking is a very fast and pressurized process. Each fact or keyword normally carries half to 1 point, and that's what we're going to look at, because when you're marking 100 papers in a day, you look for keywords to determine marks in essay type questions. Bad handwriting gives you a bad attitude, because a person who's marking does not have the time to try and work out what you've said in your scrawl. So if you want to have a bad mark, do give a bad handwriting. If you've not got the right answer and there's no method, we can't give you points. Now let me just explain this. I went into an advanced exam on estates and I broke my financial calculator just before walking in. I fell down the stairs. Needless to say, I was quite shaken up and I really didn't know how I was going to write this exam. I got 67% in the exam, but it wasn't because I got my answers right. It was because I wrote down the methods. So please remember, you need to put the methods down. If you don't get the methods, then you are going to lose out on marks. Because even if you do get the answer right, if there isn't a method, often we won't give you the marks. Now, as a marker, I've heard every excuse and seen more written swear words than you have. If I get irritated, I'll not be looking for extra marks for you. So WTF stamps do not amuse me at all. And I've had enough of those. And believe me, I've had enough little scrawled comments in the margins. The bottom line is, if you don't understand the work, I don't really care about giving you the marks. So that's all you're showing me by swearing in the paper, is that you don't understand the work. You haven't done the work. Let's have a quick word on keywords. Keywords are very effective in order to take an overview of your notes, but we can use them more effectively in the exam as well. What we do is we select the keywords that work with personal associations to you, but still represent the central concepts or crucial facts, and commit those to memories by using any of the memory techniques that we're going to discuss in later modules. Listen to the lecture as well, as they'll often use a deeper intonation or emphasize certain keywords or clue words, and those you need to learn to watch out for, because then you can study those particular areas. You continually test your recall of information using the trick of memorized keywords to build the confidence to use keywords with your revision. This is most important because most of us tend to be a little bit wary of a keyword, even though they're the most effective learning tool I know. So one of the things we are going to do is use your keywords in our marking memorandums. And that's one of your protections if you can learn via keywords. That's one of your protections when it comes to performance in your exam paper, because if you've got the right keywords, you're going to be able to put them down. And we're going to mark on keywords because we're going to make sure that our exam marking is fair and unbiased towards you as a student. There are other protections. After writing and collating the questions, the proposed paper should be moderated to eliminate obvious mistakes from the examination, and again moderated externally to ensure that examination standards for a given subject are approximately consistent with the institutions and meet the outcomes and skills profile. We are then going to make sure the person setting the exam gets the exam back, and they must do a final proofread. Only then does it go to printing. In the exam hall itself, there are invigilators. Now, these do not know much about the exam itself, so they can't be drawn into giving the student hints while they're writing the exam. And most institutions will also try and implement anonymous marking, which means the exam candidate does not provide any identification on the answer paper except for a candidate number. In theory, this means the marker will always be unaware of the candidate's identity until all the marking is complete. Finally, of course, we are going to send the papers for moderation, and the moderator will choose at randomly the papers that they're going to moderate, and they will then look at those papers. What is moderation? Well, moderation is very simply a checking process. It's almost like a quality assurance. Exams need to be set from the learning materials, except for the postgraduate levels, and the exam should be moderated or checked against the outcomes before you write it. and this is something that most accredited learning institutions will do. Some papers will be looked at by more than one marker to ensure the marking is fair or at least consistent, and this is a form of moderation too. However, in principle, your mark is most likely to be derived from the scrutiny of the paper by a single individual. For better or for worse, this is how it works normally. If there is double marking, it's where two people mark an exam and then those 2 marks are correlated to a single mark. Quite often I find the arithmetic in this case to be quite suspect. Now, most institutions that claim to double mark really have a single marking by an assessor followed by a cursory check by the moderator. I personally believe this should be set at a 25% level of randomly chosen papers after the exam has been assessed, but that doesn't always happen. The moderator process should always be defined at a percentage of papers which are checked for fair process and correct application of memorandums. Most institutions do have such a process defined. So to sum up, keywords are an excellent way to learn, and we can use them in studying and in recollection quite effectively. Naked Minds has got a course on keywords which we hope to put on Udemy quite soon. Examiners do not want you to fail, as a general rule. Markers will mark according to a marking memorandum, which is based on the set work of the curriculum. And moderators ensure the course and the memorandums are aligned to the curriculum and the learning outcomes desired.